This episode may contain stories of domestic violence. Please be advised. Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, where each week we sit down with people just like you who have left abusive relationships and found healing. Don't forget to check out our website, sage.community, because together we can survive abuse with grace and empathy. Now sit back and get comfortable. The Sage Advice Podcast starts right now.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Sage Advice Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Erin. Make sure you check out our website, sage.community, and follow us on social media at our Sage Community. So today's guest is one of my best friends. Please welcome Maribeth to the show. Hi, Maribeth.
Hi.
Thank you for coming.
Of course.
So Maribeth and I have been friends for about 8 years now. And before we met, Maribeth was in a toxic, abusive relationship that honestly, I don't really know much about. When we met, she had moved on and married her husband by then, but she wanted to come on and talk about her past experiences and how she moved on to find a healthy relationship with her husband. So, Maribeth, let's start with the question, why come on and tell your story now that you're married and moved on?
I think, I have a very healthy relationship now. My husband and I have been together for 10 years, married for 9, and he is everything I never knew I needed, honestly.
That's sweet.
He's the complete opposite of anyone I've ever dated, which clearly is what I needed. But I think I thought I was past things, and even recently, especially now in this pandemic when we're just home so much together.
Yes.
Things have kind of crept up where I'm starting to realize that I'm still impacted a little bit. And I have had to explain why to him and realize that I never actually told the full story to anyone else. And I knew you were doing this great project. So I felt like it would be the perfect opportunity to kind of share what it was.
Well, thank you for trusting me and coming on. And I think it is really important to tell our stories. And he was having a conversation with Eva, who did the podcast. And there are still some things that I haven't fully shared with her, and she probably knows the most. So I understand the need to eventually get it out, but sometimes you need time to pass.
Yep.
So where did you want to start?
I guess we could start with what made me realize that I might want to share my story.
Yeah.
So, and the risk of being a little bit crass, we know most men are either a boob guy or an ass guy.
Okay.
I think my husband is both, but he is one of those guys who will smack my ass at any opportunity, or used to.
Fair.
And it finally got to the point where I was so irritated and he couldn't understand the level of irritation. And it actually forced me to start thinking about why it bothered me so much. And that's actually part of my story, is that this ex of mine, was incredibly very domineering. And whenever we would get intimate, he would stick fingers places they didn't need to go.
Oh.
And even when I told him not to, he would insist and tell me that I would like it at some point. So I think just that whole situation has kind of made that part of my body off limits totally.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, I think that conversation is really what made me start thinking about, okay, maybe I haven't actually dealt with all of the fallout from that.
Yeah, it's funny that exes like that have a way of creeping back in, even if it's just, random thought or even a random text or a random contact. There's just that a lot of them can just creep back in. And one of the pieces of advice I got was every time that happens, you have to go back and do the work on it to kind of remove their element of control.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You can't let them ruin the good thing that you have in front of you.
No.
But it also helps to have someone that understands at least the emotion, even if they don't understand the reason behind it, which fortunately is what I have. He's a rare breed. So
he's a good one.
He is.
We love Jer.
Yeah.
So was this, I guess, what was your pattern of dating before this guy?
So I've listened to your podcasts.
Okay.
I actually listened to the episode with Jen a couple of weeks ago while I was cleaning the house.
Yeah.
And something she said really resonated with me in terms of the way her relationship with her dad and the way it kind of shaped her relationships as she got older.
And she talked about Southern family, which you're from a Southern family as well.
Yes. And I do remember distinctly having a conversation with a good friend of mine in Charleston, probably a month before I moved up here to Virginia, about how I was that cliched girl with daddy issues and had never realized it. It wasn't like he was not there. He was always there, but he was that dad who was the children should be seen and not heard kind of thing. And, my brother was a football star. And so that was his thing. He never came to my track meets. He never came to my swim meets, nothing. And so I think I grew up always just craving male attention.
Yeah. I was going to say.
It wasn't so much about I need to be in a relationship to prove my worth. It was, I just need male attention. So I really wasn't very critical about the people I got into relationships with, because as long as they were paying attention to me, that's what mattered.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was very entrenched into those relationships that I realized this is not a good thing, probably.
Yeah.
I had a high school sweetheart. He still is one of my best friends.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, he's amazing. Beyond that, the series of relationships I had was terrible. They were all womanizers or narcissists or, there was always an issue that I was trying to overlook. And being a psychologist and knowing that I was going to be a psychologist since 10th grade, I have this savior complex. So I always had. Mm-hmm.
Don't we all in that situation? We all have a savior complex.
Yeah. So I always have this, but I can see the person he can be mindset and set out to that is the relationship goal, which isn't healthy. The relationship goal is to be in a relationship with somebody, not to work toward fixing them. But that's kind of the pattern I was in.
Yeah, I follow Gabby Bernstein, and she's wrote a bunch of books, but she was talking about relationships today, and she has this little mashup video out, but she talks about how every relationship drives you to a higher purpose, or it solves some need, or it helps you heal in some way. And if it's no longer serving you, and if say you've progressed to one level, but the other person hasn't progressed at all, then it's time to leave the relationship. And, and so I thought that was a good way to put it, because I found myself before always feeling like I wasn't successful or wasn't good enough until I was in a relationship. And so that was kind of how I defined everything. It's well, obviously I haven't accomplished anything because I'm not married by 25. And unfortunately, that means when you have a connection with somebody, you kind of push yourself into it, even though it's not, little bells and whistles are going off and you're like, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of, we came at it from a little bit different ways, but ended up in the same result, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and coming, like you said, from Southern roots, I like to tell the story. I just got a new knife set for Christmas, which yay, adulting.
I got one 2 years ago, so it's great.
But my grandmother, my dad's mom, my brother used to do Cutco. Like that was one of his first jobs, was the Cutco knife, door-to-door sales. And I guess she bought a set off of him and was planning to give it to me. And on my 25th or 26th birthday, ended up giving it to me. It's like, I was saving this for your marriage day, but I just don't think I'm going to make it to then.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt trip much.
Right. And my mom's mom always, because I'm the oldest granddaughter on both sides, my mom's mom always used to remind me that she was married and had at least 3 kids by the time when she was my age. And this was when I was like 24. And I'm like, I have more plans for my life. Like, I'm going to grad school. I plan to start a career. I don't even know if I want kids right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see the expectation in the family. And it's funny you say that about, the relationship ending one, putting yourself to a higher standard in your next one, because the boyfriend I had before the ex that this story is about is one that I was with for almost 5 years. He cheated on me.
So substantial.
Mm-hmm. He cheated on me twice with the same person. The first time I took him back, the second time was what broke it, but it was not a harmonious relationship. This was the age of the razor phone, if you remember those. And I'm pretty sure I broke at least 4 of them, throwing them across my apartment because I was so mad at him, which and that kind of was a breaking point, along with him cheating on me for the second time, was like, what has happened to me? This is not who I want to be. I'm not the person that breaks things because I'm so mad about a situation that I'm allowing myself to stay into.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And I know you haven't listened to the podcast that Eve and I did on gaslighting, but I said the same exact thing. There was a moment where he pushed me so hard. Not physically, but pushed me emotionally so hard. And then I asked him to leave and he wouldn't. Mm-hmm. 10 times I asked him to leave and he wouldn't. And I just got so angry that I grabbed my phone to throw it. And at the last second, I just went, oh, that's not you. So it's funny. It does. It gets you to a place where you don't recognize yourself. And that's when I think dangerous things can happen.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Yeah. So how did you get entangled with this guy?
So I hadn't planned on it. I actually resisted it for weeks, but he was very persistent. So I was in grad school, and I was working as a grad assistant. And so for people that don't know, I was in grad school at the Citadel, which is a military college in South Carolina. The grad school program is civilian, so you don't have to be a cadet to be involved in the grad program. And so I was a grad assistant in the psychology department, and he was a psychology major. He was a cadet, and he was a senior. And he would come in and kind of hang out. And then, a couple of weeks in, he would make comments about how I seem like a lot of fun and we should go on a date or this and that. And he just eventually wore me down to the fact where I was just like, oh my God, I want him to leave me alone. So I'm going to say yes, which is never a good idea.
No,
it's never a good idea, but I did.
Say.
So we had our first date and it actually was really fun. And I had already secured my internship up here. So I knew I was moving. to Virginia within 3 or 4 months from then.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, this is one last little fun thing before I move.
Hurrah.
Yeah. I didn't realize how intense his personality was or how controlling he wanted to be. I didn't know that coupled with that, he was training for bodybuilding competitions and was on all kinds of steroids, which make it even worse.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I know you guys can't see Maribeth, but she's not a big person.
No. Which, I mean, so
you're feisty, but you're not big.
Right. Yeah. So, before I knew it, he was showing up unannounced. I couldn't figure out how until I finally went into my phone, because at that point I had gotten away from the razors, and he had somehow turned on tracking on my phone so he could find where I was at any given point in time.
Wow.
My friends would call him the fun sponge. And I just wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, no, it's fine.
Wait, can we explain to me what the fun sponge is supposed to mean? Like, he sucks all the fun out of the room?
Yes.
Yeah, it took me a second. I'm a little slow tonight, but
no, he would show up and like basically chastise everything going on, get mad at everybody for being as drunk as we were because, we were in our 20s in Charleston. And then like one night he literally picked me up and carried me out of the bar because I refused to leave with him.
Wow. What would be going through your mind during that?
Honestly, I don't remember. I maybe was thinking, oh, this is cute. Look at him trying to be Mr. Romeo.
Officer and a gentleman type of movie, but but not.
Yeah. Just very domineering, very controlling, very machoistic. There were times when he would tell me, like, we would have a fight or something and I would not be up for anything. And he would get in my face and tell me I would need to respect his needs as a man. And he didn't care whether I was mad at him or not. I had to lock him out of my bedroom several times, knowing that he was big enough to knock it in. Fortunately, he never did, but he could have.
Yeah. So how long did your relationship last? I know you left, but...
We met in late March, early April, I want to say. And I moved to Virginia in August. So basically that summer, he did come up here with me when I came up to do like all my paperwork and everything for HR. And that was one of the worst fights we ever had, moving, kind of like coming back down. And that's ultimately what spurred me to break up with him. We were back at my apartment. Oh, so I forgot this part. So Charleston in the summer gets a lot of rain. Charleston is below the sea level. So when it rains, certain parts of Charleston flood. And we had been out on a date one night. He was driving my car and decided to try and drive through a neighborhood that was very clearly flooded. And it stalled my engine. And because the neighborhood is flooded in Charleston, it's half saltwater, which means that it doesn't just flush itself out. Like, you have to actually take it to a mechanic. They have to do this special, thing to fix the engine. So my car was in the shop. We drove a car that he had borrowed up here. And then when we got back into Charleston, obviously I had no transportation. So he dropped me off at my apartment. That was one of the nights where I was very mad at him. He told me I needed to do what he wanted me to do, and I refused to. He started picking up things around my apartment, throwing them at me, throwing them at the wall, throwing them, on the floor at my feet. And luckily I had neighbors in this apartment complex who I knew and who knew him and who came over and basically forced him out and told me to leave and call the cops. So I went to a friend's house that he was not familiar with because he had kind of staked out where every one of my friends lived. Yeah.
It happens though. It's scary,
It
but
does.
it happens a lot.
Yeah. So I went there, I called the cops, I told them what happened. I told them, my address, that I was probably not going back there for at least a day or two. I told them about my car. So they eventually, they made him pay for the car. But that was probably 3 weeks before I moved here. And then within a month or two, he was texting me, telling me that he had seen me certain places. Like he had found his way up here and
Oof.
figured out where I was. So I had to change my phone number, put a restraining order on him. It was really scary for a while. So
Do you believe that he was actually up here? Or do you think he was just trying to scare you? Yeah.
No, I think he was, because he grew up in Prince George's, whatever it is, Maryland. So he is very familiar with the area. He has friends that lived in Reston. That's where we stayed when we came up here to do my paperwork. Yeah, he was not unfamiliar with the area at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I got to say, for you to move up here and have to go through that without any family or friends around makes you just want to just come through the computer and give you a hug, because I didn't know you then. What was that like?
Whew. Well, obviously I was ready to get out of Charleston.
Yes.
I was ready to get away from not only him, just like the whole history of me being in Charleston. So it was it was a nice start. It was a fresh start. My first roommate I found was amazing. Like she was incredible. We still keep touch, even though I haven't lived with her in almost 11 years. So I feel like I made my way, like I feel like I'm resilient in that aspect. I don't, you're the same way, you and I are a lot alike in that way. We will find our way and we will make friends and we will meet people and we will make our people.
Yes, we will.
I had also, by January of that year, had met the group of girls that we met through. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge supportive factor. So there were things in place that helped me kind of persevere. And then, in May of that year, I met Jeremy and here we are.
So, there you go.
Yeah.
And now you got a kid and a house and a nice life. And,
yes.
So when you first started dating Jeremy, though, did any of those, old wounds kind of sneak up, or did he melt them away?
They really did not at all. I think I was so attracted to the fact that he was unlike any guy I'd ever dated. I've either dated kind of like bad boy kinds of types or chefs, because I was a server for so long.
And not notorious for great relationships.
Chefs are their own type of bad guy.
Yep.
So Jeremy is very stable. He has a very, very stable, supportive family. He's a total nerd, which I love about him because deep down I am too. He's extremely sensitive. He is romantic to a fault. He's kind of almost the girl in the relationship in a stereotypical sense, which I think suits me well, because thinking back on my childhood and everything I brought up in the beginning, I've always been extremely independent, because I always, like my mom and I have a very strong relationship, and that can't,
that's good. Mine too.
That can't take over what's lacking from a relationship between a daughter and a father. But I always saw my mom very independent and very self-sufficient, and that she would be able to support herself if she needed to, and always took a lot of pride in that. And I think I modeled a lot of that after her. And that was one of the issues with me and my ex, is that he did not want me to be independent at all. He wanted me to be completely dependent on him. And he was so angry whenever I did something without telling him or consulting him or finding out if it was okay, which I'm an adult. Like, why should I need to do that?
It's interesting though, like, we're talking about us and how free-spirited we are and things like that. And one of the misconceptions that a lot of people think is that only, weak-willed women, or whatever that even means. I don't like that saying, but people kind of think, it's, that the person, the wallflower, or, not the strong, well-educated person that ends up in this type of relationship. But it's been some of the fiercest women I know who've reached out to me so far.
Yeah.
They go after us for a challenge, which is, weird to say, but it's true. And so you should, you got some good company.
That's a badge,
there,
I think.
People.
I think we should earn a badge for that.
We should wear it as a badge of honor.
We are fierce enough for predators to seek us out.
But not take us down, because we're much stronger than that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah.
To go back to what you were asking, no, like none of it surfaced for a very long time, actually, after Jeremy and I met. I don't think it was even until maybe Daniel was born. And I think just, my kind of issues with that, like the postpartum stuff and everything. And I think just the mental state that I was in just kind of brought everything to a head. And it's probably
trauma.
Yeah.
It's two different types of trauma, but they're held in the same place in your brain. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so things definitely changed in a lot of ways between us at that point. And fortunately, he's been willing to have a lot of conversations with me and has been very understanding, even if he's still been frustrated about it. But it's frustrating to me as well to realize that, like, I thought I was past this and I thought I met this wonderful guy and I didn't have to worry anymore. And there are still these things that obviously I'm working through that I didn't even realize I was working through. Like, it's as simple as Daniel crawling into the bed with us and like burrowing way down into the covers, like down to my knees, and freaking out about it. Like, you've got to get up here now. And both of them are like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just can't have you down there. Like, just the expectation of a violation is so visceral. And I can't verbalize that in the moment because my child's right there,
Or sometimes you don't even realize it. Sometimes it's like your body's crying first, and then your mind takes a second to catch up.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time, if you can believe it. But I wanted to see what parting words, and it's been a while for you since you've left your relationship, but what parting words would you have for somebody who's, struggling with finding healing themselves?
I would say to obviously trust your gut. Know if you're not feeling right about something, find someone to talk it through with, even if you don't think they will understand. Just airing it out seems to help. And I think much like you've exposed through this podcast and through this experience, like there are a lot more people who have had experiences like this than we realize. And so
absolutely,
in sharing your experience, you may open a safe space for someone else. And just other than that, just kind of continue to love yourself and know that you did what you needed to do for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Healing isn't linear at all. That's always what I say. It's up and down. It's a roller coaster. You think you're great one day and the next day it's kind of rough. But, just keep working on yourself. Keep trying to dig out those spurs from those mental headaches, and I think they'll get there.
Yep.
All right. Well, good. Well, I'm glad you came on and shared your story with me.
Thank you for letting me.
Of course. Stay tuned next week, everybody. We'll be back with another episode. We've got some more exciting things in store. Don't forget to check out the website, sage.community, and interact with us on social media. We want to hear from you. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or if you're willing to share your story, please email us at sageadvicepodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, remember, when you're kind to yourself, the healing can begin. See you next time.
This show was brought to you by inflowradio.com, the best curated talk radio network for personal development, wellness, spirituality, and conscious business.
If you or someone you love is in immediate danger, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. For more information, please see the resources tab at sage.community.